JK 24/7 न्यूज़ में आप सभी लोगों का बहुत स्वागत करते हैं। आज हमारे साथ एक बहुत ख़ास मेहमान जुड़ने वाले हैं और उनकी कहानी, लद्दाख के साथ जो उनकी कहानी जुड़ी है वो वाकई सुनने लायक एक कहानी है। लद्दाख की सोसाइटी और लद्दाख के लोगों के साथ जो उन्होंने काम किए हैं वो वाकई तारीफ़ काबिल हैं। हमारे साथ सिंथिया हंट आज जुड़ी हुई हैं, जो कि हेल्थ इंक एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, एक चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट है, यूटी लद्दाख की एक चैरिटी ट्रस्ट है, जो उनकी ये फाउंडर हैं। और ये ट्रस्ट 29 ईयर्स से जो है लद्दाख के लोगों के लिए, मार्जिनलाइज लोगों के लिए, अंडर प्रिविलेज लोगों के लिए काम कर रही हैं। तो आज हम सिंथिया हंट से खुद जानेंगे कि लद्दाख में उनका सफ़र किस तरीके से रहा और हेल्थ इंक जो एक चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट है वो किस तरीके से काम करती है। सिंथिया, मोस्ट वेलकम।
Thank you so much.
And Cynthia, first, I would like to ask you to introduce yourself to our viewers, please.
Thanks. Yeah. I came to Ladakh in 1989 actually to do a research project on development work here and just decided to stay. I started out in the Tibetan refugee camp, and then in 1992 we founded Health Inc., recognizing that in the remote villages back in the 90s, that women didn't really have access to the information that they needed to create the kind of development they wanted in those areas. And we've been working in remote areas and with marginalized people ever since.
Right. So, Cynthia, it's been 31 years for you in Ladakh, and you must have seen Ladakh change and how over the years, and in good ways, in bad ways. You've seen a state go, you've seen a union territory come. So I would really want to ask you then, how has your journey been so far?
Indeed. Back in 1989 and in the early 90s, especially in the wintertime here, there wasn't electricity. And there was one photostat machine in all of Ladakh. I remember that distinctly. And you booked a phone call. If you needed to call back to the office, you booked a phone call a month in advance.
Right.
But the big change has been going out into the remote areas and seeing what access to information, news, what was going on from the district government that people in places like Dibling had then as compared to now. And that's been the really positive change that I've seen, that we are really connecting Ladakhis. And when you give people access to knowledge and information, the changes that they make for themselves are really quite wise and well informed.
Right. And so was it very challenging to work with the society in the beginning? And what kind of challenges did you actually face? I mean, it must have been the language when you initially came, it was the culture. And since you were so driven to do something for the society, not necessarily that they accepted your approach or your way of work. It must have taken you years to get past them. So what were the challenges you faced?
Indeed. One of the things that I've always liked about the structure of Health Inc. is that the board decided early on that we would have interns from these villages. Young men mostly back then, because of the travel harshness, that had to drop out of school in order to take care of their families, and they wanted to complete school, so they would do an internship with us, and we would spend 8 months of the year in the villages. And with these young Ladakhis who were from the same hardships that people in remote villages faced, they would come to trust us more easily. In some places, like I'll use the village of Hanu as an example, we were working there 6 years before they really thought, well, maybe they don't mean us harm. And I understand completely how they feel, because people kind of come and go from those places without really staying and learning what the people themselves want in terms of change. I think the internship program has probably been the reason behind Health Inc.'s success.
Right. So can you also please brief us about the different kind of projects that Health Inc. takes up?
Right. And this has changed over the 29 years of HealthInc too. Back in the early 90s, what people really wanted was a functional school and a functional health clinic in their villages. And as women, we work with co-ops of women in each village. As the women's got the school functioning again, and as the women got a health clinic and access to health information, as important as health care, then they started thinking about their young people. How do we keep young people in the village because of this mass exodus to lay and sending children away to go to private schools, and then the village becomes childless.
Right.
And they started thinking about could they plant trees at 4,000 meters? And back in the early 90s, that wasn't done. And then they started thinking about how do we make our village sustainable into the future? And this is a place where they're at really right now. How do we recreate community that the mothers and grandmothers feel that they had 30, 40 years ago? And what kind of community do the young people see as the future of Ladakh, which is very different from people my age and what we want. We started that question with a visit from the High Commissioner of Canada here. We started the winter camp program in remote villages in 2006. And that is probably one of our most successful programs because it allows us to offer the kind of education young people need and want today, as well as play ice hockey in the village.
Right.
And that gets children away from this thing called winter tuition, which I really don't understand at all. I think that India is the only country in the world that encourages children to go to school 12 months of the year. It gets them back into the villages where they can learn their traditions, their cultures, spend time with the memes and abiles, and learn a new sport that's a team sport that really teaches them that cooperative work ethic.
Right. So your winter camp basically started with the idea to keep the kids in the village so that they could learn new sports, spend time with their family, and not run away to cities for tuitions or to lay for tuitions. So what kind of response? How do you get? What kind of response do you get from the kids for the winter camp?
Well, we don't have a single village where we supported winter camp starting that doesn't still have a winter camp going. So that, and it's been taken over by the youth associations in the villages. So that 100% continuation, I think, speaks for itself in terms of what the children and youth in a village want. They want to be at home. They want to have new experiences in that place that is their family home, where they feel comfortable, where they're willing to try new ideas, where they fit in instead of standing out. So the other thing that we've really noticed with the winter camps, though, is it's not just that reconnection with family, but it's the stress levels dropping. Right. Because children that come to Lay who are not from Lay, and according to S&M Hospital, right, there are some 25,000 children that are not from Lay living in Lay. Those children don't belong here. They don't necessarily live in a really secure home. They don't necessarily travel back and forth to tuition or wherever they're going in a secure way. Well, all of that exists in the village. And so if you allow children to have that 3-month period in the wintertime to recharge, then the difference that you're going to get is a relaxed child, and a relaxed child can learn and be a part of society.
Right. So basically the future of 25,000 kids is at stake currently.
Well, that's my belief, and I'm probably an outlier in that because I don't think we see any real clear issues in youth in Ladakh right now. But we have statistics from 1990 in terms of children identifying with anxiety, depression, or stress, and statistics from today. And it's a night and day difference. So talking directly to the young people, they will say that their hopefulness for the future has gone down over the past 2 decades, as well as their stress levels in terms of what's expected of them as a child. We're expecting this of children, has gone way up in terms of that stress. So I think we do have an issue with these 25,000 young people. And I think that a child deserves to learn from family as much as learning from a school.
Absolutely. Correct. Right, Cynthia, and we've known that Health Inc. has also worked with women who have got HIV, right? I would like you to talk about that program as well.
This is run by one of Health Inc.'s members, Stan Zandolma, who is the counselor at S&M Hospital.
Right.
And she's been doing a wonderful job for a long time. But as you can imagine, some of the women with HIV and hepatitis B, both of which are issues here in Ladakh, come from more impoverished families. And you need to stay on your antiretroviral drugs. You need to go for your viral load testings twice a year. And these can be very expensive, especially with hepatitis B, which can spread through a family quite quickly.
Right.
Yeah, and so those expenses become overwhelming for these women and these families to bear.
Absolutely.
And the government can't necessarily help everybody here, so Stan Zandolma's program helps these women to maintain their viral load testing and stay on their meds and have a healthy diet. And what we have found, what we've seen in the transformation with HIV and AIDS, is that you can live a long and productive life and be a healthy member of your family and your society if you can stay on your meds. So that program has been really important to us, and we're really pleased that S&M Hospital has been working so hard on this one.
So tirelessly. Cynthia, coming back to you, which project has been the closest to your heart?
I have to think about that
That's a tough
because
one.
there are some really special ones. And I think for me, as somebody who has worked in community development, what I love is when I'm walking down the market here in Leh, or I'm out in the villages, hitchhiking back to Leh, and a vehicle stops, and they look out the vehicle and they go, "Abi Leh, I think you need a ride back to Leh." When I run into the children who have been in our programs 10 years ago, who are now mothers or fathers or professionals, adults in this community, and they say, the project made a difference in my life. I wasn't comfortable in my school. I wasn't comfortable in my family. My father was drinking too much, and I felt the stranger in my group of friends. And the project taught me that I'm just fine exactly as I am. I can believe in myself, and when I work hard, I can make things happen. And to run into these kids again 10 years after I've last seen them and see what they're doing, and more importantly, that they're going home and passing it forward
To their generation.
to the
their
next
kids.
generation in their village.
Yeah.
That's what development should look like to me. So those projects like Winter Camp or Ability Camp, where we have differently abled kids coming, and a mother saying, "I've never seen her laugh like that before." That those are the human needs that we all want to have as a part of important development for the new Union Territory.
Correct. So right. I also would like to ask you, Cynthia, that what kind of role has Health Inc. played during COVID times in Ladakh and after the COVID, like first wave came, we recovered, we settled, then the second wave came. So it's been going on. It's a very long drawn pandemic, and it's really been stretched. So what kind of role has Health Inc. played in the lives of people who have been, in far and beyond, in villages where they would have been scared, not knowing anything about the pandemic? The medical situation in the villages have not been great. And I have heard of instances where villagers have stopped anybody from entering their villages because they fear, if they catch the COVID, how will they be rushed to the hospital? So how was it during the COVID times for Health Inc.?
Right, and just like so many NGOs here in Ladakh, in 2020, our whole yearly program had to just be thrown in the rubbish bin. And what we were seeing, what I was seeing was that fear. And that was a real issue that needed to be dealt with. The health department was doing a good job in providing access to health care,
Right.
but that fear and isolation and the results of that. So what we did is we went to Sachin Kumar, the DC at the time, and said, is there any chance we can go out to these remote areas and deal with the 95% youth unemployment? And let's use this as an opportunity, right? Because everybody is thinking of this as a disaster. But instead, let's use this time last year to look at what we can redesign in order to make our services more flexible and applicable as COVID might hang around or the next something might come. And we started the Youth Conservation Corps, and the DC chose the village of Numa because he knew that there were issues out there. And even though they had a tower, information wasn't getting to the individual households.
Right.
And the children were feeling quite despondent. So we took a group of 11 unemployed youth from the central part of Ladakh and visited out there and found out what their resources are, what their needs are, what their fears are, and what kind of work to learn projects could we create that would support the children's socio-emotional needs so that they could gather safely and work together safely, as well as their skills development needs.
Correct.
And that, the project was so successful, the YCC group took it forward into a winter camp for those young people. And those young people felt confident enough around us by that time that they started really coming up with good ideas about what children, students, and youth, dropout youth, need in terms of creating the skills they can to live in places like Numa or to migrate to other parts of Ladakh.
Right.
And that's why this program is ongoing now. So that it's now in its third phase.
Right.
And we're looking at introducing technology and traditions together.
Correct.
Under an information technology program
Right.
in remote areas that understand their resource base first, because we don't have close links to our resource base anymore. And we don't understand what is the sustainable use of that resource to carry young Ladakhis forward. And then also look at the 21st century and what do these Indian tourists want? What do the young people want in terms of raising their own children in these villages? What does the future look like in terms of sustainable water use and issues like that? And that's where the program is at now, where we can blend the traditional cultural knowledge of the village along with IT and 21st century skills like teamwork and communication.
Absolutely.
And help these young people who still today on Independence Day don't have access to their schools.
Right, imagine. So rightly said, they don't have access to their schools, no internet, no network, which is, that is actually a very major issue in Changthang, that let alone internet network is a big issue in Changthang. And दर्शकों को बताना चाहूँगी कि हमारे पीछे एक लूम है, ये एक डिजिटल लूम है और हेल्थ इंक के प्रोजेक्ट का एक पार्ट है और आने वाले कुछ दिनों में ये लूम्स जो हैं न्योमा में जाएंगे और न्योमा के जो यूथ हैं, न्योमा की जो गर्ल्स हैं, वो इन लूम्स को चलाना सीखने वाली हैं. सो कमिंग बैक टू यू सिंथिया, दिस प्रोजेक्ट दैट यू हैव रनिंग इन न्योमा राइट नाउ, a couple of volunteers and a couple of workers have come from different parts, and soon you will be starting the work from Sakti. Right. So I would also like you to tell us about how your 12-15 days of your tour in the Changthang villages is going to be like, and what are the villages you're going to cover?
Right. Well, those 4 villages, which are Sakti, Kargyam, Numa, and Hemya, each have an offline server installed in either their school or their gompa or their panchayat hall in the village. And that server actually can broadcast for 2 to 5 kilometers, and all of the households in the entire village can tune into that server and get the very best of NCRT and Department of Education curricular material, as well as learning materials from all over the world, and more importantly, local content about, like this loom, learning how to weave or learning how to develop community-based tourism in their village. In each of the villages, what we're going out this time is to start the MeshNet radio program in that, where children who haven't had a voice since COVID started because their schools have been closed and their villages have been isolated, will learn how to regain that voice, as well as planning, how to plan a radio program, all the skills that are necessary in critical thinking in terms of communicating on the radio. Right. And they will be broadcasting to their villages and learn how to create both a radio program and think about the opportunity of podcasting to the rest of India in the future. So that's what we're doing as we go out this time. Numa is still a special case for us because that's where the DC started this program. Right. And the girls there, when we were in the village last month, said what they really miss since winter camp is they've lost their space to learn and work together. And it's a group of 13 girls. And what they lost their loom, in fact, at the end of that. They would really like to have an innovation center in Numa so that they don't have to migrate to Leh, and they can learn things like weaving, but learn how to computer design for weaving. Right. So that it matches what their image of the future is. So in Numa, we'll be talking with the girls, and they've already come and seen the incubation center under the Department of Industries here in Leh, and they've met with its director, and they want to see if they can start that out in Numa itself.
That is great. And what exactly are you going to do at Hemya? Hemya is going to be your last village, right?
Hemya is our last village, and it's just a middle school. Hemya is an interesting case because they have a young woman who's in charge of the village education committee there who has convinced the parents to take their children out of private schools and bring them back to the village, mostly for socio-emotional learning issues, because she felt that the village was threatened by having all of the children migrate out of it. Right. So in that school, those children are really looking at the issue of what makes a healthy village. And they want to use their meshnet on their school and their very close links to the village education committee to look at how can the school be the center of a healthy future for the village of Hemya. And actually, one of the first steps we're thinking about in Hemya is if you visited schools in Ladakh, you don't find many clean toilets. And the children want to address this issue. Why do we have a clean toilet in our home, but when we go into the public space, we can't have a clean toilet? And it doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make sense to these children. So they're really researching the issue of what are the benefits of making a composting toilet there, and then increasing the biodiversity in their schoolyard, and growing some food, and creating a habitat that supports other living beings in their schoolyard as well. So it's a really interesting way to learn our sciences and our math skills and our communication skills through a practical problem in the school itself.
Right. And coming back to Neoma, Cynthia, where are you going to procure these looms from, and how many looms to begin with?
Right. I was really lucky during the National Handloom Festival here. I just bumped into Poonsak, who's an old friend, and he was using this New Zealand loom. And when I saw it, after watching the girls struggling to weave on that huge hand loom that we have there, and these are 14, 15-year-old girls, when I saw this one, I just put a notice up about how nice it was to see this loom operating, and friends from around the world immediately said, let us buy one for the girls at Numa. Yeah. So we will be buying them from Chennai and installing them in Numa if the girls say that that's what they want to do.
Right. And that is such a beautiful initiative. It was really nice talking to you, Cynthia. It's just commendable, the kind of work you have been doing. I mean, forgive me for saying, but you're from another place, and you come to another place, and you give your life to those people. It is so beautiful, and thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, Zainab. And do remember that when you give your life to other people, your life comes back to you from those people.
That is so true. Thank you so much. Thanks. हमारे साथ नवांग फुनसुक जी यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं, जो एक डिजिटल लूम को चलाने में एक एक्सपर्ट हैं. काफ़ी साल उन्होंने हैंडलूम्स में अपने काफ़ी साल दिए हैं, इस इंडस्ट्री में काफ़ी अपने साल दिए हैं. फुनसुक जी, बहुत स्वागत है आपका.
नमस्कार.
नमस्कार. सबसे पहले हमें आप ये बताइए, जल्दी से ये बताइए कि आपने टेक्सटाइल्स में, हैंडलूम्स में, इस इंडस्ट्री में कितने साल अपने दिए हैं?
मैंने टेक्सटाइल के इंडस्ट्री में 2004 4-5 से ही है इसमें, बट मेरा अपना शुरू करके लगभग 11 साल हो रहा है।
राइट। और आपने अपनी ट्रेनिंग्स कहाँ से ली हैं? हाउ टू यूज़ द लूम, किस तरीके से यूज़ करना है, डिज़ाइन सेंस?
अबाउट दिस पार्टिकुलर लूम आई हैव गॉट, मुझे हिंदी में बोलना था।
चलेगा।
हाँ, तो अबाउट दिस पार्टिकुलर लूम I got training from a lady from New Zealand here in Leh itself, and then after that, I went to Chennai for further training in Chennai for some time, and then after that, I started weaving on this loom. This is called a table loom, which has 8 shaft loom. This loom is specially designed for designing pattern on the fabric. That's it. Yes.
राइट। तो दर्शकों को बताएंगे कि जिस प्रोजेक्ट के बारे में सिंथिया हमसे बात कर रही थी, न्योमा का जो प्रोजेक्ट है, ये लूम्स जब न्योमा जाएंगे तो फुनसुक जो है हेल्थ इंक को वहाँ पर ट्रेनिंग देने में हेल्प करने वाले हैं। फुनसुक तो आपसे गुजारिश करेंगे कि इस लूम को किस तरीके से यूज़ किया जाता है, थोड़ा सा हमारे दर्शकों को बताइए।
जी, जैसे हेल्थ इंक का एक प्रोजेक्ट काफ़ी देर से न्योमा में चल रहे हैं, विंटर में हो चाहे समर कैंप हो वैसे में। तो इस बार उनका ये वो था कि अभी गर्ल्स लोगों को थोड़ा सा वीविंग में थोड़ा सा उनको ट्रेनिंग कराया जाए। तो उनके लिए जिस ट्रेनिंग के लिए वो लोग कर रहे हैं, दे हैव ऑलरेडी गॉट इनफ फंड टू परचेज 2 लूम खरीदने का उनको पैसा है। तो ये वहाँ के लिए बहुत हेल्पफुल होगा, क्योंकि ट्रेडिशनली जितना भी हमारे चंगथंग में वूल्स होता है वो चंगथंग से ही सोर्स होता है। तो वहाँ की लेडीज़ को अगर ये सारा अगर हम ट्रेनिंग दे पाए तो उनको हमारे फ्यूचर में सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट के लिए एक बहुत बड़ा स्टेप होगा मेरे ख्याल से।
जी, फुनसुक जी, हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए बहुत शुक्रिया आपका।
थैंक यू सो मच। थैंक यू।
बहुत खूबसूरत एक एपिसोड, एक बहुत खूबसूरत प्रोग्राम आप लोगों तक आज हमने पहुंचाया है। वाकई में तारीफ़ काबिल बात है, हेल्थ इंक चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट ने इतने सालों में, 29 सालों में लद्दाख में जो काम किया है, अगर हम मेडिकल की बात करें, अगर हम एजुकेशन की बात करें, हर फील्ड में, हर एंगल में उन्होंने बहुत काम किया है, बहुत मेहनत करी है। और सिंथिया ने खासकर यहाँ पे रहकर, लद्दाख में रहकर, लद्दाख की सोसाइटी के लिए, लद्दाख के बच्चों के लिए, लद्दाख की आवाम के लिए बहुत आगे बढ़कर उनके भविष्य के लिए उन्होंने सोचा है और आज तक सोचती आई हैं। बने रहिए, इसी तरीके की कहानियाँ आप लोगों तक लगातार पहुँचाते रहेंगे। सोनम आंगचुक के साथ मैं ज़ैनब संधू, JK 24/7 न्यूज़ के लिए लेह लद्दाख से।